Hello, hi, and welcome to another episode of Wellness in the Workplace. My name is Mbali Mzinyane, and I am your host. Wellness in the Workplace is a podcast that aims to equip new and experienced professionals with the tools and insights to navigate challenging workplace dynamics. And on today's episode, we are continuing with our series titled My Career Stories, where we are chatting to women from all walks of life. We're chatting to them about their career journeys, some of their failures, successes, and even lessons along the way that they can impart during the episode. And on today's episode, we have a very impressive young woman. Her name is Kelefilwe Kungwane, and she is the head of insurance risk insights and data analytics at one of the country's biggest insurance companies. And she's also a fellow of the Actuarial Society of South Africa and a Chartered Enterprise Risk Actuary with life insurance experience. She's been recognized for her exceptional performance, her strong technical and interpersonal skills throughout her career. Welcome to Wellness in the Workplace.
Thank you so much for having me, Mbali.
Thank you for making the time. I have known you, I guess, for a while. I met you once, some time ago, when we had the opportunity to travel abroad, and then our paths reconnected recently, and I was like, I have to talk to her about her career journey, because I was so impressed with like the brief time that we had spent together in our previous life. So thank you for being here and just for allowing us the opportunity to get to know you and your career story. Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Awesome. So before we get into the meat of our discussion, can you tell us who Kelefilwe is? Tell us about your upbringing and how your upbringing, your childhood, has really just informed the person that we see today.
I would start off to say that I'm a person who approaches life from a posture of hope.
Okay.
And I derive a lot of joy from being plugged into my pockets of community and doing the things that I love, and also work that I find meaningful. And yeah, I think I find it very interesting when I have to answer that question, because I always feel like, you know, I've been on this earth for like 29 years now, and there's like so much to me. So it's hard to like put it in a sentence.
Like or two, yeah.
But I think in a nutshell, that's what I think would encompass who I am. And professionally, as you mentioned, I work as an actuary.
Please, let's say that again. She's an actuary. Let's say that again.
And in terms of my childhood, so I was raised by a community of teachers. My parents were teachers. A lot of their siblings were teachers, and their friends. I was exposed to teachers and understanding the value of education from a very young age. I think I was taught that education is important not only to acquire knowledge and better yourself, but also as a way to build a sustainable life and as a ticket out of poverty. I think a lot of people in my parents' generation didn't have the opportunity to go to school and to pursue tertiary education and things like that. So I think that value was placed a lot for us as their kids, to say, you need to go to school, you need to make sure that you study the right courses that will help you build a meaningful and sustainable life. And I'm a child coming from a big family. Okay. So I'm the second of six.
Sure.
I come from a very big family, and we've also had a few cousins kind of come live with us at home for long periods of time throughout my childhood. So I think I've also been raised to value community and having people show up for you and showing up for them as well. I think it's also helped me deal with a lot of different people, different perspectives. My siblings and I are all different people. And I think it's also been such a wonderful experience to see how we've all grown, and just watching them grow into, being adults and their own people.
Yes.
So I think it's been an incredible experience just growing up in that context.
Yeah.
And I think it's also helped me as I grow and the way that I approach my work, just valuing the people around me, valuing different opinions and thoughts and people who think differently to me. I think, it's really been an interesting journey.
Yeah. So with you being the second of 6 children, do you feel that there is some level of pressure for you to live up to a certain standard so that your younger siblings can look up to you?
Yeah, look, I think, having the pressure to model something good to the people who come after you, I think is always there. And I think it's also, I see it more also as a responsibility to model the possibilities or the things that, my siblings could step into or they can experience as well. So I think there is a level of pressure that comes to it, but I think I see it more of a responsibility than anything else.
Yeah, and that's such a positive perspective to have on it, seeing it as a model of possibility. I really, really like that. And you mentioned also, just like in your upbringing, how there was an emphasis on the value of education. So how did you then decide what you wanted to study? And more specifically as well, where you wanted to study, because you went to Tux, right?
Yes.
So how did you go about that process? And the moment that you say that you're an actuary, I mean, people's eyes open up because we know that it's not an easy degree. It does take a lot of, I guess, natural born intellect, number one, but also a level of commitment and dedication and hard work to then get to eventually qualify to become one. So tell us about just that process of how you got to choose what you wanted to study and why actuarial sciences.
It's an interesting journey. I think it wasn't always something that I thought I would study. Well, initially I didn't know about actuarial science. So I think in high school, or even younger than that, I always thought I would do something medical related. So at some points I wanted to be like a cardiologist.
Okay.
At some points I wanted to find the cure for AIDS.
Okay. Big dreams. I love that.
And then I only found out about actuarial science in grade 11.
Okay.
I did a program called Up with Science at the University of Pretoria, which is why I ended up at Tux. And that program basically wanted to expose people from previously disadvantaged backgrounds to the sciences and almost like the world that exists within the sciences field, and then careers that you can pursue there, and as well as mathematical sciences and statistics. So there was one time, I think in grade 11, where there was a lecturer in the maths department who kind of talked about degrees that you could pursue in that department, and then he talked a little bit about actuarial science, and that was very interesting for me because I loved maths. It had been my favorite subject for a very long time, so it was very interesting to hear about a career in mathematics. So when the opportunity came for us to do a career research project for life orientation in grade 11, I decided to research a little bit more about actuarial science. So that was basically my project for life orientation. And a lot attracted me to it. I think the first thing was just being able to apply mathematics and statistics to solving real world business problems was very useful for me to see it from that perspective, because I think in school, the way we are taught maths is just equations and things like that. So it's very hard to see it, how is this going to be applied in reality?
Real life. Yes, what does it mean? Where am I going to use X and Y in real life?
It's like trigonometry and algebra and all of that stuff. So it was very useful for me to see how it can be actually applied in real life. And yeah, just the thinking about, I think they mentioned a lot about, you'll be solving complex problems. It's very challenging. And I felt like, yeah, man, I think that would be, that would be really cool because I enjoy solving problems. I enjoy mathematics. So it sounds like a really great career for me to pursue. What I found interesting at the time also was that there were so few actuaries in South Africa.
In general, or just black women?
In general.
Even fewer black women,
so I think was something around 1,000, if not less.
Sure.
Actuaries in South Africa. So I found that really interesting, that this career sounds really cool. I can see, how one can build a meaningful career in choosing this field, but why there's so little actuaries in the country. And I had never heard of the term actuary before, before I did the upward science program, and I don't know anyone in my community. So I also felt that I want to do this also to make it more accessible, and for people to kind of like see that this is something that they could also pursue, especially because I didn't see any black people doing it or being actuaries. So that was also a motivating thing for me from a representation perspective. I think it was important for me to also
that is important. Representation is so important. So then let's talk about your career journey, right? You go through varsity and you obviously do well because you ended up in Golden Key, which is an academic society that recognizes academic excellence. So you obviously did well, and it's time for graduation. Where's your headspace at? What are the opportunities looking like for you at that stage?
Yeah, so I think my time at university was very interesting. It was hard. I think actuarial science is really hard. I believe people now. Because initially I thought people are exaggerating.
Yeah, I'm different.
But it was really hard. I mean, I enjoyed it. I think I could, with the years that passed, I could see why I chose, to do the degree, and it was challenging, but it was engaging as well, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, I did my 3-year degree, and then I did my honors degree after that. And for me, my focus throughout my university time was also to maximize my board exams. So because in total, actuaries need to write about 15 board exams. But some of those you can do in university. So I try to maximize the number of exams I could get in university so that I have as few as I can post university. And juggling that with work. So I managed to get all of those in university.
You did all of your board exams?
Or the ones I could get in university.
How many were those?
11 at the
11
time.
out of 15 during university?
Yeah.
Hectic.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
It felt really awesome to be able to do that. And I think it put me in a very fortunate position as well, that, I could explore different offers from companies who were looking to hire graduates at the time. So I think I had 2 main things that I was thinking about when I was kind of like thinking about, where am I going to work? Yeah. Because I think the entry-level actuarial jobs are quite similar. It just differs by the type of industry that you work in, whether you're doing life insurance or short-term or banking, etc.
So what would be the entry-level positions? Quantitative analysts?
Basically analysts. And it's quite similar across the industry. And I think even from a remuneration perspective, it's very similar because they typically look at the number of exams and pay according to exams. So for me, the main things that were important for me were, will I enjoy the work that I'll be doing? And will I find it meaningful? And the second thing was, will I enjoy working with the people that I'll be working with?
Okay.
I think both are very hard to gauge when you are in varsity, because you don't know. You can only go by, you know, what the company presents to you. But for me, those are the two things that I really prayed about when I was kind of like contemplating which company to work for. And I've been so fortunate that that's been my experience. And I think even throughout my career, that's always been something that I'll go back to. Am I enjoying the work that I'm doing? Am I finding it meaningful? Is it, you know, helping me build my career the way that I want to build it? And do I enjoy working with the people that I work with? And it's been so good for me so far.
And I mean, you were mentioning off air that you've just been with one company since you started working. And I mean, that's a testament of just maybe the work culture, the opportunity that the company presents for you, and just you enjoying your time there. So maybe let's talk a bit more about then what that journey has looked like for you within this environment and some of the challenges that you may have potentially faced, work-related or otherwise, just within the context of that work environment.
So I think I've had incredible managers throughout my career, which has helped me kind of like come into myself and, you know, navigate my career. I've worked with managers who have been investing in my development and seen that as important, as well as, you know, delivering work as we need to deliver work and meet deadlines, etc. And I think I've been able to manage my work in a way that helps me grow. So meeting deadlines, but also meeting my own goals at the same time. So I think that's been very a fantastic experience for me. In terms of the challenges that I faced, I think the first one has been around work-life study balance. I think that's one of the almost like first challenges that I needed to kind of like navigate very early on in my career. So I mentioned that I got the 11 exams in varsity, but I had to do the balance when I started working. And it was very difficult for me to get that balance working in the beginning. I was still living in Pretoria at the time and traveling to Joburg every day and and I didn't have a car, so I was, you know, using public transport. And I commuted for something like 4 hours a day, so 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the evenings. And that chowed into my study time. So I struggled to study and make time for studying. The first exam that I wrote post-varsity, I failed.
Was it the first ever exam that you failed?
Yeah.
And how did you handle that?
It was devastating.
Because you don't know what failure is like.
It was hard. But I think part of me was not that surprised, to be honest, because I was struggling. And I wasn't getting enough time to, you know, to prepare properly for the exam. So I ended up moving. I made the decision to move to Joburg so that the commute time is much shorter, so that I can put in the hours to then study. But I think I've also realized that work-life study balance is a myth. I'm glad you're busting that myth. It's a myth, and it puts so much pressure on us to have everything together all the time. One of the ladies that I really look up to at work introduced me to a concept called tilting.
Okay, tell us more.
And tilting is basically making the decision to shift your focus to the thing that matters
the most at that time. Got you.
So I think that fundamentally changed the way I approached this whole balance issue, because then I was able to structure my time and my attention in a way that makes the most sense to me and for me to achieve the things that I want to achieve. So for example, if I was gonna be writing an exam in May, what I would do then is have a study plan, chat about it with my manager, and then because then I would have to take leave, so then they're aware when I have to take leave, and then early on in the year I would focus a lot on work, doing delivery, making sure that I do what I need to do at work. But towards the exam time is when I start taking leave to study and shifting my focus now to do work. To do my studies. And that helped me because I could still deliver at work and study, but I didn't have to do all of it at the same time. I think it's Oprah who says you can have it all, but not at the same time.
It was Michelle Obama.
Oh, it was Michelle, okay. And I thought that, you can also do it all, but not at the same time.
Exactly.
One of my mentors also told me about this analogy about, when you're juggling multiple balls at the same time. You only have one in your hand when you're juggling. So you just need to choose which one you have
at that point in time. Love that. I love that so much. And I think that's such a realistic approach and a realistic way of approaching the goals that you set for yourself. And it's also kinder to yourself, right? Because when you think you can do it all at the same time and then you hit with the reality, you almost get into that self-pity mode that can induce a bit of unkindness to oneself. So I'll ask you another question related. Okay.
So I wanted to talk about another challenge.
Yes. Let's get into it.
I think as a young Black woman in corporate, something that I've also had to navigate is just being Black in a corporate space and in a white male-dominated space. I remember, when I started working, how wild it was to me that we are referring to everybody using their first name, even very senior people. It was I think work for me was such a big culture shift, to be honest. And I think it took me a while to kind of acclimatize to work. And I think it's still a journey, to be honest. I think there's always this talk about being authentic.
Yes.
And, be who you are, bring your full self to work. But I think sometimes we also need to question whether it's safe to do so.
Ooh,
and for who it's safe to do so.
Love that.
And are we creating an environment for people to feel safe enough to bring their whole selves to work? I think especially when you have underrepresented groups in your workspace, I think as leaders we need to do the work to make sure that everybody can bring their full selves to work. And I think that is a conversation that we need to have, because I think there's a lot of mental labor that happens for people when they're at work, because it's an environment that they're not necessarily familiar with. We don't always know what the social cues are. I think, but practicing authenticity is very hard work, especially if you're from a underrepresented group, at least from my experience. I think already, one is almost very self-aware because you're so different, and it's almost like you're hyper vigilant. Am I speaking the right English? Am I articulating this properly? Am I showing up in the way that people show up in these spaces? You're already thinking about all of that all the time. So I think we need to acknowledge the mental labor that some people actually do when they show up for work every day. And I think it's something that I've had to navigate throughout my career.
And you touched on so many things, because that experience is not, it's not exclusive, I guess, to you, and not to invalidate, obviously, what you've been through, but I've just heard very similar experiences from a lot of my guests, young Black women who have to then do a lot of the emotional and the mental labor that comes with navigating these spaces that aren't psychologically safe for them. And as a result of that, it affects, the level of engagement in the workplace. It affects the level of productivity in the workplace, and ultimately their performance. And I love how you said that, as leaders, the responsibility is that, we or other leaders need to we need to create spaces that are safe, where people can really come as their full, authentic selves in the workplace. I love that. And speaking about leadership, I mean, you started recently I don't know if it's recent, but you're in a leadership role, as the head of a division within your organization. Tell us more about just that transition into leadership, right? Where you are now expected to make the decisions, and, you are informing decision making and strategy, etc. What has that transition been like for you, and what are you learning about yourself in your leadership role?
I think in terms of preparing myself for the role, I think a lot of it had to do with, how I show up at work. And I think almost like taking my career into my hands.
Yes.
If I could put it that way, but also leaning on community. So I think for me, I take ownership of my career, and I'm very clear about the kind of career that I want to build, and the kind of work that I would find meaningful and I want to be involved in. But at the same time, I know that there are people who've gone before me. I have people that I'm journeying with, so just engaging with those people has helped me quite a lot. So I've had lots of mentors throughout my career, both informal, kind of like peer mentorship, and formal mentors who are typically people who are more senior than I am, who can kind of like journey with me and show me the ropes almost, and give me advice when I need it. So I think that for me has been an important part, I guess, of preparing and building my career. I think the second thing is around when I say taking ownership of my work. I think firstly it's putting my hand up for work, making sure that I can do my core deliveries properly, and putting in the time and the effort to deliver proper work. But also, if I have the capacity, then put my hand up for things that are not necessarily part of my KPI, or that are not necessarily my job, but if the opportunity arises, to kind of like step into that. And I think it's important because it enables me to demonstrate my abilities and the things that I can do, and the fact that going the extra mile, I think is a useful thing to do, because it also gives you exposure to things that you would normally not have gotten exposure to. But I must admit that it does take a lot of work, and a lot of capacity. So it's because you still have to deliver on your core work, and then deliver on something else, right? So it takes a lot of time, a lot of work to do. But I think for me, that has been something that's been very useful for me in helping me build my skills, but also visibility. I think putting your hand up, getting involved with stuff, does create visibility. People can see you, they can see your work, they can vouch for your work, which is very important. And I think sometimes you actually operate at a level before you get the promotion. So I think doing things like that helps you to operate at that level, and then people can see, this is what she's capable of, and then, the more work comes, I guess. But the promotion comes. So I think I would say that's pretty much the kind of like prep work that I did. I think for me, what also helped is qualifying very early and very young. So I think on average it takes people around 8 years to to finish their board exams, and I did that in like 2 years.
You did it in 2 years.
Yeah.
Is it because you finished your boards, most of your exams during varsity?
Yeah.
That is impressive.
Thank you. I think qualifying for me did 3 things. I think the first thing is that it gave me credibility. Having the qualification behind your name holds some weight. The second thing is that it gave me capacity. It gave me time. It gave me time to get involved in different kinds of projects. I'm generally a person who likes doing like different things. So I had time then to do ad hoc projects and things that are not necessarily, related to my core role, because I didn't have to take a lot of time for study leave, and I was around and available to do work. So that helped quite a lot. And the third thing, I think it also gave me time and space to reflect. Very early on in my career, about just going back to my why. Like, why did I decide actuarial science again? And why did I think, qualifying as an actuary is important for me? And then I think it helped me then formulate what good looks like for me for my career. I remember like a year or a couple of months after I qualified, I did this career vision board for myself, and that basically was meant to capture what good looks like for me from my career and the career that I'm trying to build. So there's a lot of themes in that, but I think some of it relates to, being an actuary who's aware of a context, that I operate in a context and I work in a context. And what does it mean for me to be an actuary working in South Africa? How do I use my skills to advance the country? In what ways can I get involved in that? And also understanding my context in my actual work that I'm doing in the industry that I work with, and also just thinking about things like making sure that my skills remain relevant, that I'm agile, I can change with the times, and just building. I think one thing that's been very important for me since very early on in career was building a very strong technical foundation. Because I think for me, the way I've been thinking about it is that having a strong technical foundation will help me then apply that knowledge in various spaces or to various problems. So I think that also is the prep work that I needed to do to then just think about how I want my career to progress through time. And I guess that's where it's landed me now, because it's something that I reflect on quite often, just to make sure that I'm still on the right track, and I tweak it as time goes and I have more experience. But it's almost like more of a guiding light, if I could put it that way. And it informs the decisions that I take from a career perspective.
I love that so much, because that is a visualized way of having a career plan. I've never heard of a career vision plan before, and I love that because it's something that I now want to do for myself. I've heard of a vision board. I've done vision boards, and usually there's like a small section there at the top with, career ambitions and everything else. But having one specifically for your career, I think makes it a bit more tangible and a bit more accessible, and also I guess the process of doing that a bit more fun, right? Because a career plan, when it is documented like in a formal type of way, can be a bit intimidating. So I really like the idea of a career vision board, something that I definitely want to do for myself as well. So talking more about just you being in the space that you're in, and on the back of, the discussion point around representation, how are you changing your work environment currently, and hopefully for the broader actuarial industry, for the people that come after you?
I think there's a few things that I'm involved in or have been involved in my career. I think from very early on, I've been very passionate about transformation in my profession and in the space that I work in. I mentioned earlier on that, when I started working, I didn't, or way before I even started studying, I didn't know of any black actuaries at all. And I think even throughout my varsity time, and even when I first started working, there were very few, there are still very few black actuaries, particularly black female actuaries in the country. And I think for me, my passion for transformation also comes from the way I grew up.
Sure.
I was born and raised in Pretoria. For the first 7 odd years of my life, I lived in the township. And then my parents moved us to the burbs, if you could call it
I want to call it that, yeah.
Mainly so that we could get into good schools, because they really wanted us to get good education. So then they moved us to that space. But I moved into an area where there were very few black people. So I've dealt with a lot of racism throughout my childhood. And I think for me, and also I think it's a bit lonely when there are very few people who look like you. It can be a very lonely journey. So for me, I think that's why it's important. I think representation for me is very important because of that. Because I think when you have people who look like you, who you can relate to, it makes your experience a lot better, and it doesn't feel as lonely as otherwise, and you don't have to, or you experience less, bias and discrimination and all of that stuff because you're represented. So I've done some transformation work. I mean, at my job. Just sitting on transformation committees, raising issues, trying to figure out solutions to those issues. And even within my profession, I've been part of an organization called Actuaries Lekgotla, and that's basically an organization that's very passionate about transformation and seeing more black and women actuaries in South Africa, because we are so underrepresented at the moment. So we've had various initiatives through the years, and also just talking to our professional body about issues of transformation, maybe things that they should be thinking about differently, and just trying to make the experience for black actuarial professionals a lot better. So I'm hoping that is doing some work to help us move forward from a transformation perspective. But I think the other things that I do that are not necessarily formal in that way is mentorship. I really value community, and I think, my career, I didn't build it myself, if I could put it that way. There's this proverb about it takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a village to do a lot of things. It takes a village to build a career. I personally don't believe in the concept of being self-made. I think, it's the people that we have journeying with us who help us build the things that we build. And for me, that has been no different with my career. I've had to lean on my family, my friends, people that I work with, my mentors, my colleagues, my peers. I've had to lean on a lot of people throughout my career. And I'm trying to also pour out to other people as well, because I've had the benefit of having people pour into me. So I feel that I have the responsibility to do the same to people who come after me. So I do mentorship. A lot of it I do informally. Some I do I have like formal mentees, but I do a lot of informal mentorship as well. It's just grabbing a coffee with someone and then just talking about stuff. If they need to bounce ideas off of me, then I make time for them to do that. So it's things like that. And I think, I don't know, I've always felt a responsibility to do that, to be the role model who looks like me that I haven't necessarily had in my career. So those are some of the ways in which I do that.
I love that. And in just closing our conversation, what does wellness look like for you?
Wellness for me, in general, in the workplace.
Let's do both.
I think wellness for me in the workplace means having the necessary tools for me to thrive at work, but not only at work, in other spaces as well. I think for me it's been very easy to get so consumed in work that I forget about other stuff. So I think just having the tools to thrive both in and outside of work, just remembering that I'm a whole human being in and outside of work. I think I've had to do some work, or I think it's an ongoing process, to detach my self-worth from my work.
Sure.
It's very hard work, especially for a person who's been kind of like top of the class, you know, always passing and things like that. I mentioned that I failed an exam before, and that was very devastating. And that's when I realized, like, what's wrong? Like, why is it so deep for me? And I realized that, you know, I attached so much value to that. So I think for me, it's doing that detachment, I think, looks like wellness for me. Knowing that if something, you know, doesn't go well at work, or if I fail an exam, it doesn't mean I'm a failure. I just failed at something, and I've got the opportunity to do better next time. I think it helps me mentally process failure. It helps me build resilience, and not being afraid to try again if things don't go well, and understanding that it's, you know, it's part of life.
It's part of life.
It's part of life. I think that's what wellness looks like for me.
Okay.
In the workplace, I think in general, prioritizing rest.
Okay.
Looks like wellness.
I love that.
I think we live in a very fast-paced world. You know, our jobs are demanding. You know, our social things are very demanding. There's social media. There's all of these things. I feel like we're always on the go. So prioritizing rest and leaning into it, I think, is what wellness looks like for me.
I love that. We actually had an entire episode on prioritizing rest for sustainable success. And I think people typically viewed, because I think it is changing collectively a bit, viewed rest as a means to an end and not the end itself. And I think that needs a mindset shift, because it is part of being productive when you are resting.
And for me, that's the work I've needed to do, and my manager is incredible at that. And it's something that, you know, he just reminds me to do. Just don't forget yourself.
Don't forget yourself.
But it has had to be a mindset shift for me, because also, I mean, I would typically think that I would need to earn the rest. Like, I need to
have you done enough so that you rest?
Exactly. And it's been so difficult to almost like reframe working from a posture of rest instead. Like, I can do my best work if I'm, you know, well rested. Exactly. So it's a journey for me, actually. I haven't always been good at it, but I'm trying.
You're getting there. That's good. I think the fact that you're even conscious of it now, you know, is an indication that the work is working. And any closing remarks just about, you know, discussion, about representation, about being an actuary, anything that you want to just leave with the audience?
Sure. I feel like there's a lot I can say.
Well, this is the moment to say some of it.
Yeah, I think when we think about representation, for example, I think, particularly when you go to like women's events and things like that, when we talk about imposter syndrome, we talk about imposter syndrome almost like as exclusively an internal thing, and as, we need to fix ourselves. But I think we don't explore enough of how much of our external environment just feeds it.
Sure.
And I think we need to stop trying to fix people, but try to fix the environment that may be causing imposter syndrome. Please. I think, yes, there are some internal things that kind of like go on, yes, but I think a lot of it also has to do with our external environment. And I think, for me at least, I think the conversation just needs to shift a little bit so that we can address the issues.
I love that so much, because I feel like you've just opened another conversation right at the end of this discussion. Because I remember actually reading something, and I promise we'll close off after this, but I remember reading something where the author was saying that imposter syndrome is a result of us finding ourselves in situations or in environments that weren't necessarily built with you in mind.
Yes.
And because of that, in the process of acclimatizing to that environment, you end up feeling like an imposter because it was not created for you to belong. So that perspective for me just changed the game. It hasn't translated completely where, I am fully aware of it all the time in moments where I do experience imposter syndrome, but at least it gives me perspective to say, but there's something that needs to change. So I love that you brought that up so much. But that's an entire episode altogether.
We won't get into that. I think
we won't get into it.
My real last closing remark, and I think it's particularly for us young people, or maybe particularly for people who are just going to start working or just started working.
Yes.
For me, the advice I would give to myself way back when is like relax. Honestly, it's not always that deep, and our careers are very long.
Yes,
they are very long.
I literally said that to a friend this past week because she was just experiencing something at work, and I was like, there's something that I'm consistently realizing is that our careers are long.
They are very long.
They're very long.
Yeah.
So that one situation that seems insurmountable right now, trust me, will be like nothing in a few months. Nothing. So,
and I think it's part of the experience.
Yeah.
Some of these things we just learn from and hopefully do better if they don't, if it's things that don't go well. But I think I spent so much of my time very early on in my career just wanting to have it all figured out, and I think that's what was important for me when I did the vision board. It wasn't steps for me to achieve. It was more about who am I trying to become and what is the kind of work that I'm trying to do. I think that's more productive than, in 5 years' time, I want to be CEO, and then, in the next 5 years, I want to be chair of a board or whatever. It puts so much pressure, and I don't think it's necessarily productive. So I think just thinking about the person I want to be and the career I'm trying to build has been such a useful thing to me and helped me navigate my career better. Because sometimes the steps that I took were not part of my plan, but, they were very instrumental in where I am today. Yeah. And other times, it was completely unrealistic, So I think just thinking about it that way for me personally has helped me. So I think if anybody is stuck, in that perspective, I think it's useful to think about it in that way. Amazing. And having that as a guide instead of a 10-point plan to become a CEO. Love that.
Kelefilwe, thank you so much. There's clearly a lot that you and I can talk about. You've shared so many beautiful nuggets, and I appreciate just your honesty, your reflections as well, because, from what I'm hearing, it does, sound like you have thought deeply about this, and I appreciate that and the sharing of that on this episode. Is there anywhere that our audience can find you if you want to be found? If not, it's okay.
I think
it's
on
okay.
LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn. Okay, that's fine. You can find her on LinkedIn at Kelefilwe Kungwane. And she was our amazing guest on the show today. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for tuning in. If you're listening, if you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Wellness in the Workplace is available on all major podcast streaming services. You can also find us on Instagram at _wellness in the workplace. My name is Mbalim Ziane, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.